Good morning and welcome to KiniTalk. We have Johan, the TalentCorp CEO. Welcome.
Thank you.
And we have Liew Tong, the Member of Parliament for Kluang, Johor, second time MP. Welcome from the Democratic Action Party, DAP. Welcome. We had an interesting article on last Friday where YB raised a question in Parliament regarding TalentCorp, and apparently when the answer came back, apparently we have 30,000 ringgit being spent for every person we try to recruit back, every Malaysian we try to recruit back from overseas to Malaysia. Apparently, it looks like a lot of money, right? And Johan has been very nice to join us today to clarify that and explain a little bit about TalentCorp. So Johan, is it really true that we're spending 30,000 ringgit to bring back a Malaysian to Malaysia?
I mean, thank you, Prem. Thank you for having me and ability to clarify. I think first I'd like to thank YB for the interest that he has in our work and in raising this question in Parliament. But I think what I wanted to clarify is that it perhaps is a bit too simplistic taking our total operating allocation of 65 million and dividing it by the 2,000 odd.
Is that 65 million a year?
No, this is the total that has been accrued to Talent Corporation on operating expenditure. There was 30 million in 2011 as our launching grant, and we had 20 million in 2012, and then 15 million in 2013. But in just taking the overall number and then dividing it by the 2,000 on a return expert program, I guess we see it as a bit too simplistic, because I think Talent Corporation, we've been set up to work with leading employers to ensure that they have the talent in order that they can then invest and grow. So we then look not just into Malaysians abroad, we also look at facilitating foreign talent, also interventions for Malaysians in Malaysia.
So how does the everyday Malaysian know that TalentCorp is performing, that taxpayers' money is being well spent? How do we justify 65 million?
So we are tracked in terms of right now with Pemandu producing its annual report. We were included in that. Admittedly last year we were recorded as one of those who didn't meet our KPIs, but there is transparency in that we have our leading KPIs. So for example, the returning expert program is obviously one of our KPIs in terms of bringing back experienced Malaysians back. We also have a KPI around even foreign talent. We have something called Residence Pass, which facilitates top foreign talent to be here for even up to 10 years. We have also, Malaysians in Malaysia, we have a structured internship and also upskilling programs that we do, particularly targeted at graduates, to ensure that they're more industry ready in meeting the needs of the economic transformation.
So basically your point is that you're doing more than just bringing back Malaysians to Malaysia.
Yes. So basically, I mean, whatever allocation that we receive, I guess we're just saying that it's a bit simplistic just to take that number and just divide it by a number of Malaysians that have been approved under the returning expert program. I mean, we obviously, it is one key part of our agenda. I mean, I mentioned three main pools of talent: Malaysians abroad, foreign talent, Malaysians in Malaysia. I mean, it's obviously a key part of our work, but it's not the only thing that we do.
Tong, do you buy the answer? Is our 65 million being put to good use?
I think broadly, developing countries tends to have organizations like this. Taiwan used to have organizations bringing back talents to their country. But I would say that Johan's effort is admirable, but it's a futile effort in the context of the larger picture.
Why do you say that? Why do you're putting him down all his hard work, saying it's a futile effort? How do you justify that?
I mean, if you are having brain drain to the extent that we are having, the World Bank say that the skilled labor that is leaving the country is double that of most countries. And when you have that big situation, bringing back 1,000 or 2,000 people, thinking that they can change the entire scenario, I don't think that will work, and that will actually have a major impact on our economy.
So what are you saying? Are you saying that it's a futile effort because we are losing people, that we should stop the flow out? But the flow out are probably more younger people, right? The flow back in are probably people who are more experienced.
I think you have to look at it in a total context. The economy. Why do we do all this? Because we do all this in order to bring our economy to the next level, in order to actually have more value-added activities in the economy. But today we are losing skilled labor. So it's actually a natural progression. You're losing skilled labor, then you're losing young talent, then you're losing talented CEOs, accountants, engineers. So you have to look at it as a whole. By just picking up 1 or 2 points, thinking that we can change the entire picture, I think it's difficult. I know people are working very hard at TalentCorp, but you are working against the system.
So Johan, you've got this this thing of it as a sink, right? You're trying to add water on top, and then it's a leak underground. I mean, it's leaking down. Water level's not changing. That's the point.
Well, I guess better to add on than just not add anything and then let the water level drop. Right. And I guess that's what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to achieve some form of equilibrium in the situation, because I think with the ambitions that we're having, and I think we've been having a lot of success in terms of the growth of investments. As you know, we had double-digit investment growth for the last 2 years. To be able to sustain that investment growth, to be able to sustain the economic transformation of the country, we then need to have talent. And so then we should then be open to basically accessing talent for whatever pool there are, whether it's Malaysians abroad, foreign talent, or Malaysians in Malaysia. And I guess we see ourselves as one piece of the jigsaw. Okay. So while we're addressing these initiatives, and yes, YB is completely right, just talent corporation alone, obviously, it would seem futile almost against the bigger picture.
Who's addressing the brain drain? So if you are kind of filling it up, right, on top, right, you're doing the brain gain part of things, right?
Yes.
Who's stopping the brain drain?
So one way of understanding the situation, if I think as what YB Liew is talking about, you can sometimes say that there's a risk of a vicious cycle to brain drain, where people leave the country, you don't have enough talent, and therefore the economy gets dampened, and you don't have job growth, even more people leave the country. So that's potentially a vicious cycle of brain drain. We want to reverse that, understanding what the underlying issues that are causing this brain drain. So one, you have this holistic approach of being what the Prime Minister has articulated in terms of the national transformation policy. So it looks at both economic transformation and government transformation to really address on a more structural basis some of the underlying issues that may cause this brain drain. But that obviously takes a long time to take root. Do we do nothing whilst that takes root? So in the shorter to medium term, that's where Pemandu drives investments, which creates opportunities. We then, with other agencies, then hope to drive catalyst initiatives to then make talent more available to then support those investments, and hopefully try to get a virtuous cycle where you have investments being matched by talent, which hopefully then supports even more growth and investment whilst the structural reforms take root. So we're just one piece of the jigsaw, working in tandem with the national transformation.
Fantastic idea. But so I mean, you're from DAP. DAP always says that things are really bad in the country, nothing is really working. How do you respond to the idea that yes, it's a slow process, and that the government is doing something about it?
Just a few points. Number one, there were two previous initiatives under Abdul Badawi, and also there was a returning scientist program under Tun Mahathir. It didn't work. Both didn't work. I mean, Johan has to tell us why both didn't work.
But that's not fair, lah. That's a bit before his time.
How to avoid failure like that?
So how do we learn from past lessons?
There was this initiative, I think YB Tong is right. There's something called Brain Gain Program, which is targeted at scientists and trying to bring them back. And it's true, I think out of the 24 that came back, only one is left. You might be familiar, Raja Rasya, University of Malaysia. So he's the only one left of the program. I think one of the issues there, perhaps it was this idea that you just can take a bunch of Malaysian experts, just bring them back. But I think it didn't take into account, was there really a demand for them? Was there really an ecosystem, a research ecosystem to support these Malaysian scientists? And I think that's why in going forward, we try to be very much more demand driven. We don't, we could have like the best, Malaysian nuclear scientists out there, but why would we even want to bring them? The industry is there, the ecosystem's not there. So we want to be anchored again on the economic transformation program, the key sectors. So when we bring back, people, it's really anchored on the demand, say, the electronic sector, the finance sector. We need as people the oil and gas sector. So we work with industry. So even when we engage with Malaysians abroad, we always go together with leading employers. For example, when we were in London in April, we went out with 30 Malaysian employers. Okay. We engaged about over 3,000 Malaysian students there, and also some professionals, so that it's anchored on real professional opportunities. There's a demand for them, there's a job for them, and with Asia booming, some of these are very exciting opportunities. So we hope to at least address those past issues by being a bit more demand-driven, working in partnership with private sector.
Yeah, so now the focus has moved from bringing the individual back to creating the local ecosystem demand of which people can fit in and have long-term employment, great employment here in Malaysia.
Back to my argument about the futile effort is that, of course, as I say, it's admirable. Your work is admirable, but let's go back to early 90s. People were rushing back in the early 90s at what they call at a smaller pay, but people were coming back from overseas because the economy was really booming.
Right.
People came back, and that is where I think we have to look at the economy. Are we doing the right thing for the economy? And
the same is basically saying the same thing, right? You're agreeing. It's basically demand driven. If
Actually,
the local situations go well, they'll come back.
You're right, Prem. Actually, I want to agree very strongly with YB Liew Tong in the sense that demand drives the return. And to some extent, if you look at Malaysia today, actually we're lucky in the sense that Asia as a whole is booming, driven by China, Indonesia, in India. And we're at the heart of Asia, so we're benefiting partly from this global trend. And so, like, say, for example, when we have doctors returning from UK to Malaysia, that partly reflects that the situation in UK is weakening. We have a booming healthcare industry, so they're coming back. And we're also having, you're right, some people willing to come back for lower pay. And why are they willing to do that? Because there's the excitement of being part of a transformation. So, we have, for example, this gentleman, Khairil, he came back from, Boston Consulting Group, come back to be CEO of Axiata, because Axiata is becoming a regional entity. Similarly, Maybank and CIMB, because they're going regional, they're able to attract some bankers from Hong Kong and London coming back. Maybe the pay is less, but because they're part of an exciting transformation to become regional. So I think that's where the opportunities are.
So what agreement? It's actually nothing to do with government policy. It's the whole economic situation of the country.
Well, I think that the government economy is about government policies, and of course also the overall environment internationally. We are still on a very export-led type of thinking, whereas our export market is now shrinking. US is not doing well, the European countries are not doing well, they have high unemployment rate, they cannot consume the products that we produce. We must be able to rethink our entire economic model.
But isn't that what the government is doing?
I feel that ETP is not addressing the fundamental issues. Whereas originally...
So now we have to ask Johan to leave and call Idris Chala.
But anyway, you look at the indicators. For example, we have less and less expatriate. If you know the classification between expatriate and foreign workers, we have a lot more foreign workers over the last 10 years entering the country, whereas the numbers of expatriate actually reduced over the last 10 years. And that is something that we have to deal with.
But isn't that
maybe if I can...
Malaysians are taking over the jobs?
No, but again, I would agree with YB that expatriates is the key part of driving an economy, particularly to new areas. And he's right. After the financial crisis, there was almost a halving of number of expatriates. Okay. But I'm happy to report that, in 2004, I think the Prime Minister also again, drove a series of measures towards liberalizing for top expatriates, and so numbers back in end of 2010 were only about 45,000. Now we're looking to almost reach 60,000. So there has also been growth on the expatriate front, which again to support our key economic sectors. But I know you say it's futile, but actually to be fair, I think YB and his colleagues also engage with Malaysians abroad, and some with great success. I was very, for example, I think
they call them back in order to change government.
No. So for example,
Johan works for the new government.
So for example, one good example is that E&E is one of those sectors that we're trying to grow. We're trying to move up the value chain. We don't want just to be say pure assembly, electrical. We don't be pure assembly, pure manufacturing. And so, for example, I think the Chief Minister was very successful in engaging with Dato' Puah Kin Seng to really set up a design centre. So moving away from just pure manufacturing to bring in a design centre. So Dato' Puah has invested in a design house in Malaysia, and that's another great way for Malaysians abroad to contribute. They don't necessarily have to come back, but they can invest or share their technology know-how. It's also interesting that we were talking that the Penang Institute is inviting Mr. Chia, formerly a journalist, and now he's a billion-dollar fund manager. Again, there's much we can learn, much we can value from the networks that they have. Again, by building up those linkages with Malaysians abroad. So, I'm not sure it's futile because obviously your colleagues as well are also helping. I think in working together with us to engage with Malaysians abroad, because there's value which Malaysians abroad can bring to Malaysia.
I think it's a very good point. I mean, Penang is also doing the same thing, right? So on one hand, you're saying it's futile, but even the Penang government, the Penang DAP government is doing a lot to bring investors in, bring talents in.
Yeah, I think that is. We should do all this, but we must change the fundamentals of the economy. The economy is not should no longer thinking about just exporting. We must stop the brain drain. Without stopping the brain drain, without addressing the fundamental issues on social justice, on the prevailing political system, without ensuring that people at the bottom do not live, the skilled labor at the bottom.
But earlier you said, look, it's very much economics drives the whole situation.
No, I say that economics is fundamentally is political.
But let's say, for example, let's just say if the US is doing well, let's say the US recovers, right? Then you'll have a lot of Malaysians who are, for example, who are studying there now, will be able to stay back and find jobs there. if US is not doing so well, they're likely to return home and look for jobs, right? So in a sense that it's really, on one hand we're saying it's economic, on the other hand we're saying it's about social justice, local policies.
Yeah.
If I can help out here, I think YB is right. It's a combination of both. Because in the World Bank report, that YB
trying to agree
quotes,
because we're in front of the camera, right?
That's true. Because so what they did is they surveyed Malaysians abroad, and Malaysians abroad highlighted three main reasons why they're abroad, and it basically is a combination of, one is the level of income, the other one is availability of professional opportunities, and the third one was in terms of policies, and that includes sense of social justice and other government policies. So it's true that there are basically combinations of reasons why Malaysians may choose to move abroad. But I think at the same time, I think this is where YB talks about having to try to address these issues. I think that's why, again, I come back to national transformation. So when you talk about One Malaysia, I think the Prime Minister was very early on. He moved FIC, for example. I guess to enhance the sense of social justice. So that's being addressed. The economic transformation and government transformation is again to address how can we have more opportunities by the investments that come in, and hopefully with the new economy to raise the incomes. Perhaps the issue of difference is whether the pace and of change is of the speed that's required. I guess on TalentCorp side, we're doing our best in our space, and our colleagues are also trying their best. So I guess this is an area that we continue to work on. It's work in progress.
Yeah, of course the pace. The challenge now is that you are having people at all levels, the so-called talents, the skilled labor, and even the unskilled labor working outside the country. I think that's our challenge. Our challenge is that you have to deal with the economy. As I say, you have to deal with the economy with government policy by stopping foreign workers, by moving the industry to a higher level, by mechanization, using technology. Without dealing with that, you have more and more foreign workers coming to work here, yet locals do not gain enough in order to stay back. So we have people working in Singapore, we have people working in other countries as foreign labor.
Is Penang government trying to move away from using low-cost labor, migrant labor?
I think the whole idea of attracting design centers, the whole idea of attracting more people to work at the higher level is that you eventually leave the unskilled labor sector. To move to the next level.
So you're saying Penang is developed on the higher end, lower
so
end?
my point is that you have to deal with the bottom issues in order to keep the skilled labor without having.
But John's point is that while you're dealing with the bottom issues, you also got to do it.
I agree. I see that is admirable. The work is admirable. Whether it should cost so much is a separate issue. But the work is admirable. But you are working against the system. When the system doesn't change, when the overall prevailing conditions do not change, you can continue to work, but you bring in 2,000 in 3 years, 2,000 people, 2,105 people. You are losing tens of thousands each year. That is the challenge that we are facing.
You're right. We're probably agreeing on a lot of issues. I think
because we both read the World Bank report.
Yes, we both read the World Bank report. But one good thing I must mention that came out in the World Bank report is that it says, yes, whilst there's always a concern that you might be on a really downward spiral on terms of brain drain, they did say that Malaysia at least has been able to maintain its stock of skilled workers. The numbers that are leaving are compensated by those coming through from the education system. But obviously we can't be complacent, because obviously the ones that leave tend to be the one that's more experienced, and perhaps of quality. So we still have to find ways in terms of engaging them. Maybe I need to find a more cost-effective way of engaging them, because you have obviously been able to bring, engage the Datuk Puas of the world, you engage the Malaysians in Singapore from the the Penang networks, they're able to engage them.
So diaspora network.
So Jin Tong, if you were the CEO of TalentCorp, right, what are 3 things that you would do?
I think you focus on diaspora. You focus on the pride of being Malaysians. I think ultimately that eventually people come back and settle at a lower pay compared to what they are earning, unless they get what they call they are forced to leave their jobs when there are less and less jobs in US and Europe. Otherwise, they come back. They are settling with a smaller pay. Why do they come back? They come back because of family. They come back because they love this country. They come back because they want to be here. So that pull factor must be there before you deal with the pay, because pay is not the only issue. Pay is not the only issue, and very often when people decide on whether to come back or not, once you are at a certain level, pay, whether you are paid $1 million US, or you're paid $500,000 US.
Still a lot of money.
Still a lot of money. That, I mean, if you are talking about the talent at that level, I think pay is not the main concern. Whereas if you are talking about the skilled labor, the same World Bank report say 80% of Malaysians' labor are only up to SPM level or less. That is our challenge. Our challenge is to ensure that our skilled labor get better paid, our skilled labor have enhanced their skill, so that they are paid better locally.
If I can perhaps respond on three fronts as well. I think one is there's still an importance of outreach, engagement, and awareness, because I think there are some very exciting developments in Asia and in Malaysia, particularly with the growth of investments. And so we need to reach out to them and say, look, there's this interesting guy, Kluang from National Instruments. He left Penang like 40 years ago, and yet he's come back because National Instruments, his employer in Austin, Texas, is now setting up an R&D. So it enables him to come back 40 years later because new opportunities are rising in Malaysia. So we need to raise that awareness overseas. So I think one is, it is, I think, of value to engage with diaspora, to raise their awareness of what's happening. But of course, engaging them on love for country, family, and all the rest. But on my second point, there is value in helping or facilitating them to return. So YB mentioned that they may be coming back for family, they may come back for the professional opportunities, but they're going to have a perhaps lower pay. I think that's where the returning expert program, whilst potentially controversial, hopes to try to ease that transition. So okay, maybe you're willing to come back, but at the margin, some say, oh, this is very tough. But that's why we have this transitional tax incentives. If their wives are foreign nationals, we facilitate in terms of fast track PR, so that we make their transition easier. So even if they're motivated to come back for family or for whatever reasons, we make that transition easier, especially when we need their skill sets. But the third area is, I guess, we need to all work together. I mean, it's the interest of the nation that we leverage on the Malaysians, whether they come back or, like the examples of Datuk Puah, contribute from abroad. And maybe all of us can join forces in terms of how do we ensure that Malaysians, for love of country, contribute back to the nation.
Fantastic. I think that's a really nice summary of the issue. I think we get about working together, providing those entry points, providing the ecosystems for Malaysians to come back, and hopefully, more Malaysians come back than those who leave. And also those who leave, perhaps after spending some time overseas and acquiring talents, will then definitely come back. So maybe it won't be lost. Okay, to wrap up, thank you very much, Johan.
Thank you,
thanks for spending time to be here with us today.
Thank
you, YB.
Thank you, YB.
Thanks for having this discussion.
Johan.
Thank you very much. And for KiniTV, thank you very much for watching this.